All right, so everyone, this is the intro. Welcome to episode number 9 of No Traps, No Glory. And we have our venerable red light guest, Dr. Beth Terranova. Hi, Beth. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great having you. So we've been trying to get Beth on for a while, but she's evidently a hot commodity in some part of the world somewhere with someone. So we finally got her strapped down. There's no snow, so everything's good. And we're going to discuss all things weightlifting and physical therapy.
Physical therapy, absolutely.
So before we get started, I just want to say, everyone, all of our listeners, tell your family, your friends, and everyone else to subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud, so that way we can build up some subscriptions, get more people listening, spread the good gospel. We got a very positive comment this week. I don't know if I should say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, that the last episode, number 8 that we did, was very, very popular. Thank everybody for the feedback and review, and try to give more for that, as well as it was told that it was even more exciting to listen to, Beth, than USA Weightlifting's own podcast.
Wow.
I know, right? Isn't that pretty good? That's coming straight from the Federation. They said it just trumped it. So whatever I was rambling about.
Amazing.
And my voice is better this week, so it's just going to continue to get more sensual as we move on. It's true. Yeah. So without further ado, let's just start off, Beth. How'd you get involved in weightlifting? When did you start?
So I started weightlifting when I was 15. Mm-hmm. I was competing in track and field in the pole vault. And my pole vault coach was actually involved in weightlifting.
Pole vault, that's very appropriate for you.
Yeah, I literally walked on the pole vault team because no one else wanted to do it. So they let me on. But I was probably one of the most athletic people on the track team. Oh, yeah? So my coach, he said, if you get a little stronger, you'll probably be able to vault higher. So I said, okay. And he brought me down to the gym one night, and from there, literally, it was like, yeah, you're meant to be a weightlifter. You're not meant to run track.
Really? So, who was the coach? This was at your high school?
Well, at the time, Jerry Dunn was my track coach.
Oh, he was? So Jerry,
Jerry is still competing at 71 years old.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Jerry's been involved in weightlifting for, he's 71. He's been involved in weightlifting for about 75 years, correct? So, and yes. We hope Jerry's doing well, because at the last competition we did, Jerry decided to blow his shoulder out.
Yeah, so
hopefully it's all right.
Yeah, he's doing well. I've spoken to him.
Okay, good.
He's recovering, so that's good. He wants to lift in the Masters Nationals because, I guess he's close to winning. I don't know how many 71-year-olds are still out there.
I know one in particular. So does Viv, a very unique master lifter. Yeah. We'll just leave it at that for now. Right. But our own venerable producer is going to be competing at Masters as well, not
fantastic.
To get into a side tangent. So
exciting.
Congratulations to him.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Jerry told you to get involved in lifting.
Yeah, so I came down to Lost Battalion Hall, which is notoriously known as the mecca of weightlifting in New York, where a lot of the old school lifters would train. Even Mark Chasnoff, our coach, got his start down there.
Their humble beginnings.
Yeah, so Joe Triolo was a coach at the time.
Okay.
And I was literally, I think I weighed about 99 pounds. My arms were like the size of sticks.
And now you're about 105?
Yeah,
they're
barely.
They're the size of branches?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. I got promoted to branches. But he just taught me the lifts, and he's like, yeah, you pretty much have a knack for this. And within 2 years, I had medaled at the Junior Nationals.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's a very good start to it.
Yeah.
What year was this about?
I started lifting, I think it was I gotta say it was 2005, 2006.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly. I remember I competed at the Junior Nationals in 2009 and 2010. So maybe it was more than 2 years. Maybe it was almost 3 years of training.
Still, that's still, all things considered, that's a pretty short duration to become involved and then compete at that level. And then you medaled at it, you said?
Yeah, I medaled.
Or did you just say there? I know you medaled at it, but
my first Junior Nationals, I got a bronze in the clean and jerk.
Okay.
And the second time I went, I got a bronze overall, in the snatch, clean and jerk in total, with food poisoning.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, man.
Yeah.
Food poisoning.
That was a brutal one.
It must be an LBH thing. When I competed, the last time I competed there, I had food poisoning. It was not fun.
Well, I'm not sure that Lost Battalion has really changed much since I trained there, and that includes also maybe how often they clean it. So.
Yikes! Watch out for that.
But they renovated it recently. They got new equipment. So
oh, really?
It's looking a little bit better.
Oh, that's
I
good.
think.
As it should. I mean, for a place that has such history and prestige,
Sure.
they should do a little bit more to try to do it, especially for the amount of those involved. I mean, it could definitely contribute a good bit to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. So, so now, where do you find yourself now in lifting? What's your current career status and career goals?
Well, as I say, I'm always retired.
Yes, for those who don't know, after every competition, Beth's retired and has to contemplate her existence in weightlifting. It's always an existential bout internally, but nonetheless, the doctor always manages to be unretired until the next competition.
Yeah.
So,
I think what happens is, since I've been competing for so long, I'm just so tough on myself in terms of what I want to do and how I want to place and improve. But I guess I don't understand that as you've been in the sport years and years, you don't make as much progress as, the kid who just started, and they're only like a year in. You're making little tweaks and not making like big changes in terms of your technique or, not large increases in strength. So I think it just becomes more frustrating because I can't keep up with like the 15-year-old that is all of a sudden growing through a growth spurt and getting strong all of a sudden. And I'm like, barely hobbling off the platform.
Oh, stop. Just hobbling off the platform. Get out of here. And that's actually the reason I asked that, because I try to leading into the next question is, how is your approach to your, I mean, obviously I know Mark gives you what you're training and everything that you're going to be due for the most part, but given the years of experience and how long you've been in the sport, because let's see, 06 you started, you said?
Right.
I mean, that's now coming up on 13 years being
right.
involved in it. That's a long time to be involved. So how is your perspective in terms of yourself in training and how you approach, just over everything in general evolved in that time to where you are now?
Yeah. I think a big part of it is, I think a part of why I've had such a long career in lifting is I've always trained smart.
Okay.
I've always been careful about not overtraining, not maxing out all the time, working with weights that are, reasonable for me and kind of building up little by little. A lot have said that, I probably don't train hard enough.
Okay.
And that's people outside of this gym, obviously, but a lot of people think the reason why I don't make a ton of progress is just because I don't train hard enough, and I don't think that's true.
Okay.
But I mean, in terms of when you talk about your career in weightlifting, you talk about injuries. I mean, I've had maybe one injury that kept me out of the gym out of like that 13 years, just because I've always trained smart.
And what was that?
I was weighing about 49 kilos because it was like the Olympic year.
Okay, what year? Just before 2012, I assume?
I think it was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, I was weighing like 49, and I wasn't to be in the 48 class at that time, it wasn't super competitive. I mean, I was probably, with the lifts I was doing in the gym, probably could place in the top 5.
Okay.
So
nationally, that is?
Yeah.
Okay.
At the time, it wasn't as competitive as it is now, for sure. And I was front squatting. I think I was trying to front squat around 90 kilograms. And
it's really good for 49.
And the left side of my back just completely seized up.
Really?
I mean, yeah. And I remember I dropped the bar. I walked out into the hallway. This is when we trained in the basement.
In White Plains?
In White Plains, yeah. And I just laid down on the ground, and Mark came out and he said, "What are you doing? Get up. Why are you lying down?" And I literally said, "I can't get up. I'm like so spazzing."
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, it took a little while to come back, but I don't remember it being more than a few weeks. It wasn't like
let me tell you, I know that feeling well and good.
Yeah.
It happened about, let's see, what's that? Probably about 10 feet from where I'm sitting right now. That was the first and most serious injury. Well, I guess second most serious injury that I'd had, and that's when you can't move and you can't get up. That changes your perspective a little bit and kind of gives you a different insight on how you approach your training.
Oh, for sure.
So.
Especially the next day when you're like trying to roll out of bed and you need someone to like physically roll you out of bed.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, maybe I should never do this again.
Yeah.
But then you come back and you realize it's not as bad.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right. So that being said, now to kind of segue, for those who don't know, Beth's a doctor of physical therapy, a DPT. She worked very hard for that. So that being said, and kind of I want to tie in, let's say now professional Beth with weightlifter Beth, and you were mentioning how people say that you don't train hard enough. What does professional Beth say to answer, or in response to that question, that you don't train hard enough, which is a reason why, let's say, you're not making certain progress that you want?
You know, I think a lot of people don't understand how the body works, how the body recovers, how the body responds to training, and they think that they really need to stress the body to the point of exhaustion in order to make progress.
Okay.
And that's really not the case. Like, I think that you have to work and you have to feel some fatigue, but you don't have to basically destroy yourself in order to get better at something. And I see that a lot in terms of my patients as well.
How so? Like, in terms of, let's say, not to get too deeply involved in that, but let's say just a brief overview, like what mechanisms cause that, and how do you see that in patients?
I think a big portion of why people get injured or overtrain too hard is because they don't take into account how their central nervous system works in terms of doing the lifts, because to do a snatch or to do a clean and jerk is a big strain on your central nervous system. So even if you have the strength to do it, if you're doing a ton of repetitions, let's say you're trying to make a PR like 10 times in a row, there comes a point where you probably do have the strength to do it, but your nervous system is so fatigued that you're just not going to have the technique, like your coordination is not going to work in the same way. So I think some people will just work because they feel like, you know, I have to hit this number, I have to do this lift, or like my patients will say, like, I have to meet this benchmark in terms of my strength, etc. And I think that you need to step back and say, like, am I really achieving anything by doing this? You know, is this something that's making me better or setting me back?
I like that.
Yeah.
I've said that to people in here before, like, I either want to go heavier or on a certain day or want to do it, and I'll oftentimes say, yes, you're capable of doing it, but what's the need for you to do it? And everything, at least how I approach everything's got to be need-based in order to get your results, correct?
Sure.
So let's say, you were saying the nervous system getting fatigued. What do you feel let's say from your professional background, that's missing amongst a lot of coaches in terms of how they apply training to their athletes, and where the I guess dogma of having to work harder and train 6 days a week and basically work at 80-90% the entire week type of mentality apply?
I think a lot of coaches, they think that to get better at the lifts, you have to do the lifts only. And they'll program for their athletes, okay, you're going to snatch, you're going to clean and jerk, you're going to go heavy in both, you're going to work up to this. But they forget about the accessory work. You know, they're not giving them as much in terms of pulls, in terms of maybe like, you know, the athlete has a specific weakness that they need to work on. You know, I've seen some people lift and their technique looks just so bad that you want to cringe, and you say, like, well, maybe if you worked on, you know, for example, people who, and I was a culprit of this when I was younger, their knees are coming together and basically touching when they're trying to squat. Well, maybe there's a weakness you need to work on there, that the reason that your knees are coming together and touching, you know? And a lot of people will say, like, nah, everybody does that. Well, no, there's a reason why some people do and some people do not. But, you know, a lot of coaches aren't looking at the finer points, aren't looking at mobility issues, stability issues that drive a lot of why their lifter is or is not, you know, making progress. You know?
That makes very good sense. And I think that's something that's actually more prevalent among female lifters, because generally female lifters, you find, or I'll find, and I mean, tell me your thoughts on this, females generally have more flexibility than most men. So you're able to get into better positions, you're able to work through a lot of things because the flexibility affords you good position, but there's still a tremendous amount of weakness that's underlying all of that. So they'll forego, let's say, more accessory work needed for, again, as you said, like knees caving in, or very weak twig upper body type arms, because they're performing well in the lift, but that's not necessarily something they should be doing, correct?
Right.
I mean, that question makes sense. It kind of
like these lifters may still be making their records, and the reason is more because their technique is improving, but not necessarily because they're addressing, you know, underlying
the faults that
they need to work on.
And that's something, you're doing that for yourself, aside even just your knees coming in. Explain a little further, like what you've had to work through.
So, I mean, I've had scoliosis since I was a teenager, and I never let it stop my lifting. I trained through it, and I always felt some imbalance in terms of my lifts. And I just assumed that, look, my back is crooked. That's the way that I'm going to be, and I can't really fix that. But I took some training last year in the Schroth method, which is a specific treatment for scoliosis. And I went to, and you know, even when I took the training, I said, well, you know, I could see how this could be challenging for some people. But for me, like, I've been lifting so many years, I wouldn't worry about it. And then I went to the Schroth course as a patient. And I could not believe how challenged and how sore I was from really doing the exercises for a prolonged period of time, right? So I think in terms of my training, my progression is I've had so much trunk weakness just from that I've been really focused more on that. Like, even if it's lifting lighter weights, but doing with the proper alignment and the proper technique, and just building some strength in terms of, you know, my trunk stability is going to help me, instead of just, you know, missing jerks over and over because I think, you know, like, I'm like, why am I missing this? And then realizing, well, every time I dip for the jerk, my trunk collapses like a spring, and I don't have the stability to kind of hold on to that. So.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's, I mean, how old are you now?
I'm 28.
Oh, so I mean, in the grand scheme of things, especially as a female, you're just about in your prime to entering your prime as a lifter. So you still have, I'd say, at least 6 more really productive years ahead of you, correct?
Right, yeah.
So I mean, I think especially now, learning all that, knowing that you could really capitalize on developing yourself, and by the time you're 33, 34, you'll probably be lifting the best of your life by that point.
I'd like to. I mean, and I think this is a big thing that I've noticed with weightlifting over the years, is that if you compete in a sport, say like baseball or soccer or football, they have a natural season. Like, or basketball even. Like, there's natural season for that sport.
Yes.
And when you're off season is when you're working on all those issues that you've kind of noticed over the season are problems. What we do in weightlifting is we don't have any off season.
No, we
really don't.
Big meets that you could aim for, but for the most part, you just keep going.
And in some cases you see, like, after a lifter has competed in a big meet, they'll kind of back off. They're going to do more volume work, or they're going to do more. But even then, you don't see them addressing these issues that they have.
Yeah.
The only lifter I've actually seen doing it is Alyssa Ritchie. Okay. And I've been following her, and she's been doing a lot more accessory work. Okay. To kind of, you know, work on her imbalances and things she needs to do. And, like, I think that's great to see. And I think that in terms of weightlifting in general, we need to give ourselves some sort of an off season. Maybe it's not even from doing the lifts, but maybe focusing more on technique work, or focusing more on imbalances to get stronger for the next season.
No, that makes really good sense, especially because, I mean, just from my experience with, let's say, my training or so, like, for those who don't know or unaware, is that for, let's say, what is it, about when was that, right before Christmas, so what's that, 3 weeks now? I don't know, whenever Christmas was. Yes? Our fact check producer. Okay, so ended up just bothering a spot that always nags me in my back. And in that time, obviously, I couldn't really lift, had to take time off, get it worked on, but I've been able to focus on other things. But let's say it feels great now. And for the most part, I really haven't missed anything with where I'm at. I mean, my body feels a little bit fresher in other areas. Sure. Like before we even started recording this, Beth was testing my thoracic flexibility, and she actually said it was better than it was.
Amazing.
Before last. Well, I don't know about amazing, but we got a long way to go.
Well, I mean, it's amazing that it got better.
Wow. Well, goes to show that improvements can be had.
I'm tough. I'm a tough.
That's why your nickname is Red Light Beth.
That's true.
We'll get into that in a little bit, but let's say, what changes have you seen in the sport since you started to now?
Oh my gosh, yeah, this is a big question. I like
it is a big question, but yeah, give us a rundown on it.
So when I started weightlifting, I trained at Los Battalion. I had one female teammate. Okay. That was it. I trained with one other girl. The rest of the team was guys. And it was pretty much us two for a while. Okay. We ended up maybe having one more teammate in the time I was there, but there really wasn't any women involved in the sport. Okay. And I remember I was in high school, and, you know, obviously in high school you have image issues, and I would invite... Well, imagine being in high school, having a crooked spine, having like all these other issues, being the worst athlete on your track team. There may have been a few issues
Walking
there.
down the hallway like a question mark. I'm late.
Not to like laugh about it. It is something.
No, it's funny. You can laugh about it.
But I mean, looking back on it, I realize now that I probably had a lot more insecurity than I needed to. But anyway.
Everyone does it. Like you said, in high school, it's just natural.
So I would ask like my friends in school, like, hey, you should start lifting. You know, it's really fun. You can get stronger, you know, this and that. And they would look at me like, ew, no, I don't want to get bulky. I don't want to be muscular. That's gross.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I would just kind of wave it off and go back to my training.
Okay.
But I would say when I saw a big change in weightlifting was when CrossFit came about.
Oh, yeah, naturally.
Because CrossFit made women, I think, come more to the weight training sports and weightlifting sports, because they would be introduced to weightlifting through CrossFit.
Yes.
And then end up, you know, falling in love with lifting and really coming into the sport. And I think the women of CrossFit and weightlifting at that time made it more accepted to just be a muscular woman and to be a strong woman. And
erase the stigma, sorry to interrupt, but erase the stigma that a woman who lifted weights is going to look like some hulking female bodybuilder who's on more drugs than...
And the majority of people who I tell that I lift weights, they say, I wouldn't have even known if you told me or not. Yeah. Like you know, you don't see as much in terms of because anyone who, in the past who did that, they would think you were a bodybuilder. So they would have that image of the big hulking, like muscular woman.
With a jawbone.
Yeah, maybe on some drugs.
Maybe.
But I really felt that changed the sport. And I remember my first junior nationals I went to, there were 4 girls in my weight class that had qualified. And that was it.
Really?
4 girls in my weight class.
Well, you can't do any wrong there.
And, right. But now, you go to a junior nationals, you go to an American Open series, there's like 60 girls.
I think the numbers of females outnumber the males nowadays.
At this point now, and it's amazing, but it's totally, you have to realize, being in the sport for so long, it's a total opposite of what I experienced from when I started.
Really? That's cool. I like that. I think that's a really positive change.
Definitely.
Like, they're getting the female involvement with it. So essentially, there are a lot more people participating, a lot more athletes, a lot more coaches. Viv was actually making a mention of this the last time she was here about, let's say, what would I advise to newer coaches coming in? And actually, one thing that I didn't say to her that I should have said then was that, because she was asking about the American Open and where we went, what would I say to newer coaches going there, or someone who's never coached at a meet like that? And I said, get someone to mentor you or through it. But I would also like to add to that is that if, let's say, you have an athlete, you go to one local meet and then you're coaching them at a very large meet, you shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
That's like what I would like to, a caveat I'd like to put in. But in your going back to the original question, what have you noticed different now between athletes and coaches from when you started to the way it is now?
Well, I mean, before we didn't have this American Open series, so you would have to be a pretty seasoned lifter to qualify for like a junior national or a senior national, because the qualifying totals, in terms of like how competitive the sport was then, the qualifying totals were representative of like what would be the top 10 or top 15 in the country. So I think in terms of that, the AO series has become almost like a glorified local meet.
Yes.
And I think it's good to get meet experience. When I started lifting at Lost Battalion, I would compete once a month.
Okay. That's a lot.
Yeah. But I think it was a lot, but I think it was also good in the sense of like I've become very comfortable on the platform.
Yeah.
And you know, I consistently make my lifts when I compete because I've just had that experience.
It's there. You become comfortable.
Right. What I think happens is a lot of lifters, since they can easily qualify for an event like the AO series, will only do maybe, you know, 1 or 2 local meets and then go to an event like that and be almost like starstruck with the lights and the judges and the, you know, their coaches, you know, no space in the warm-up area. So I think in terms of the quality of lifting, I would say that unfortunately, even though people are lifting heavier weights, I would say that the technique doesn't look as proficient as I would say it did in the past. Because in order to qualify for an event like that, you had to have a very good technique and be a very proficient lifter.
Okay.
But now I feel like it's just, you know, these people are just naturally strong, so they can muscle through and they can lift heavy weights, but they're not paying as much attention to the technique aspect of it. So I feel like that's a bigger issue than I mean, sometimes I'll be at these events. I'm a referee, so I'll be at these events and I'll be like wanting to close my eyes because I'm afraid what's going to happen to the lifter. And you know, usually in the past, you would sit at a national event, you would see some mishaps and of course some like weird misses, but now it's almost like on the regular you're seeing a bunch of like weird stuff happening. So
okay, so that, I guess that's the unfortunate progression of that, and that's, I would think, just due to, just like you said, it's people just not really looking for, let's say, expert coaching. Because back in when you started, even when I started, to find someone who's an expert coach in it, I mean, there were few and far between, because it was such a, I mean, it's a niche sport now, and back then it was even more of a niche sport. So I mean, you could barely find anybody. But I think it's a matter of convenience and who people, let's say, develop relationships with, where they end up getting involved with them coaching them, whether they're a good coach or not. They're comfortable and convenient, but that doesn't necessarily yield good results.
Right. Yeah, I agree with your point to have maybe a mentor coach or someone to kind of teach you. I don't think it's enough to go to a weekend course and learn the caveats of the lifts. I mean, when I started lifting, and I can remember, I think it was like my second junior nationals, being very frustrated for some reason with my lifts. And I remember...
Was it too light?
That's another story.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Continue, please.
There was a lifter there, and she was a more seasoned lifter than me, and she said to me, she said, you know, it really takes 5 years to master the technique.
Okay.
So it really takes that amount of time, I think, to become a proficient lifter.
Okay.
So I think that...
And that's sorry to just not interrupt for a moment, but just that's the same thing when Basciano was on here. He said the same thing, and it's interesting to hear both of you say that, because he's coming from a different source. So I mean, obviously you guys, we trained together, all of us trained together, but from you being told that was from someone outside of us, he was told that from someone outside of us, and that's something big that people don't really understand at all. They think they have one good day and think that they completely, okay, I get it now. Then they wonder why the following next week, the next session, when they're doing the whatever exercise, all of a sudden they're all over the place and can't understand why. And that's something that it takes time to develop it.
Sure.
So continue as you were now.
Right. I forgot what I was.
Oh well, that's not conducive for a good podcast, Beth.
Sorry.
No,
okay. I guess I was discussing how like the technique, I haven't seen as much growth in terms of technique and.
Do you think that's going to hold us back internationally and long term for at the higher levels? Because obviously, like now you see there are many really good. I mean, the U.S. the team is rising. There are a lot more people that are able to become involved on it. Much stronger lifters, but again, the technique seems to be the major setback, I would say, from my observation, that is present with a lot of lifters. I mean, Vardanyan's obviously got great technique on things, but he's relatively few and far between.
Right.
Whereas most of them now, you have young kids coming up, but they're just so brute strong that compensates for more. So how do you see that portending into Team USA's development, and nationally and internationally?
Well, I think for right now, you see a lot of the coaches with the more elite lifters, they were trained by those like guru coaches that we're talking of, you know. So a lot of these coaches are still in the generation that they learned from, you know, one of the people who basically like brought the sport to the US. So you could cite so many people that, I mean, you can
quite a bit,
you know. You could say Jim Curry. You can say, you know, all the more senior coaches that have since, you know, unfortunately passed away, but kind of taught the current coaches how to lift and eventually how to, you know, even if you think about, you know, Sean Waxman and he lifted himself, and he had a coach that was probably more experienced in the lifts than some CrossFit guy, right? So I think in that sense, you know, I think the sport is good for now. What I'm concerned about is like if you're talking future as like these coaches become, you know, less and less involved, or, you know, now we're having a bunch of coaches who have like new techniques and new ideas and maybe weren't trained in that like old school style of the lifts. But I mean, we have to say too is that the United States is probably placing higher than it ever did before. So,
at least since the 60s, at least.
right. So maybe, I mean, recent before. I
Yes.
should have specified.
Okay.
Before in my career of,
okay,
of weightlifting,
like that,
not
yes.
including like, you know, the golden ages
Yes.
of the 60s and 80s.
Flogging those Soviets
Right.
down with communism.
So, I mean, I think that that's a sign that things are getting better. Now, we have a lot of youth athletes now, and they seem to continue to make progress. I don't know how many of them are going to continue training, how many of them are going to burn out. That's more my concern with those lifters.
Well, and that comes back around to, let's say, the original coaching question is because the coaching methods and how for long-term development, that's very contingent upon, let's say, the coach's philosophy, how they were taught and the way they learned. Because let's say, like when Klokov was here, he was saying in Russia they have the system. Their system is essentially dedicated to the preservation of the athlete long-term.
Right.
I mean, kind of paraphrase and surmise a little bit. Whereas in Bulgaria, it was just lift and that's it. And I would say, would you think that's possibly a danger of the types of coaches that you were discussing earlier, say where you just do the lifts 6 days a week nonstop and not address anything in terms of long-term development?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, because then you're going to have an athlete that's, you know, constantly injured, is constantly having technical flaws that they never address. I mean, and then going down the tubes pretty quickly because they can't train.
Yeah.
You know?
No, a recurring injury is going to stop anybody. That's not a good thing. That's something where I guess I don't know how to really address that, at least in the scope of this podcast yet to address it. So let's go into a little bit of Red Light Beth. So when did you get your national ref certification?
So I got my national ref certification in Miami at the AO series. It was a lot of fun. It was a great trip.
Yeah.
It was in 2017.
Okay.
I went
Yes, that was. I remember that now.
Because they had the Pan Ams. It was like the week before, and then the AO series.
That's great. And what made you want to do that?
Well, I had been a local referee, and I enjoyed it, and I wanted to be involved in the sport, but I didn't really see myself as like a coach.
Okay.
I guess I could help out as a coach, but I didn't really see myself being too good with like the programming aspect of it, I guess. More technique, I'm good at watching, but...
Okay.
So I wanted to stay involved in the sport and something long-term that I could do even if I stopped competing.
Yeah.
So referee was kind of like a natural path for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice. And what do you think of the present rule changes that have been adopted for 2019?
Yeah, it's going to be a big big deal, I think, for the 2020 games to have video playback.
That will make a big difference and hopefully help stave off any sort of international conflicts.
Well, if you watch the last Worlds, I mean, there were so many lifts that were just like...
There were many makes that were misses and many misses that were makes. And
Exactly. And it robbed a lot of lifters from, you know, placing and medals and things like that, you know... So it's very frustrating that that's an ongoing issue, but, you know, I think that this may help long term.
In terms of improving the sport, do you think it'll make it more entertaining or like add a little bit more? Because I mean, if you're not involved, at least I don't know. I could watch, and I do watch like world championships from 20, 30 years ago, and I'll sit and watch it and have no trouble doing so. But I mean, I guess for general people who don't know the sport, perhaps it's not as entertaining to watch. Does that add a little bit more of a element to it? You think it kind of bring it more, I don't want to say mainstream because it'll never be mainstream, but kind of make it a little bit more exciting, kind of make it more competition?
I don't know, because then you have the amount of time it takes them to review the video.
Okay.
Right? So if they're taking a long time to make a decision on something, then that's like time that you're going to be waiting. And I think that's a big reason why weightlifting, a lot of people think it's so boring to watch, is because there's a lot of waiting in between lifts that you have to kind of like, all right, especially if you have someone on a 2-minute clock, you have to kind of sit there and like twirl your thumbs waiting for somebody to come out.
Oh yeah, that's always fun.
So I don't know that's going to make it more entertaining.
Okay. And the challenge card thing that they issued and such. Is that for every level, or is that for international level?
It seems like they're going to use this video playback and the cards for only the international level events.
I think that could be a good thing.
And I think
locally, I can't see. I wouldn't. There's no need for that, but internationally, that might actually work out pretty well.
Only select events too. I don't think they're going to do for all international events, but
just
mainly
like Olympics
for the Olympic
and
Games and the World Championships. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be good.
I don't even think they know how they're going to roll it out yet.
Really?
I mean, in USA Weightlifting has said to us refs, like, we don't even know how this is going to happen.
That's very interesting. Weightlifting seems to have that trend to it where these grandiose ideas come out and they get rolled out before there's any idea or concept of how the actual protocol is going to be. It's just going to shoot first and ask questions later.
There's no detail in terms of like, okay, is the video playback going to be real time or a SlowMo?
Sounds like the government kind of. Yeah, you have to have a test bed.
Right, and they're really not. They're just rolling it out.
Well,
maybe they have tested that I don't know about because I'm not an international referee.
We got to ask Joe Triolo.
He would know.
He knows everything.
He would know for sure. But my question is the video playback going to be real time or SlowMo?
Are you asking me?
Well, I think what do you think in terms of? I want to hear your opinion on it first. You know, if it's SlowMo video, what like challenges do you think that would?
I think I would hope it to be in real time because that'd be more. I think it would be more advantageous for the lifter. Because you just like just from training, you could watch a video in slow motion and you could spot a lot of little things.
Sure.
But in the reality of it, it happens so quick that you can overlook it, and a video can show a slow motion video can show a lot of nuances to the lift that happen so quickly that it's more fair, I think, to the lifter to do it in real time.
Sure, I agree. I think in slow mo you see so many more things that. You could pick out, but probably weren't legitimate calls. Yeah,
just do it like the NFL, where you do. Granted, they use more slow motion stuff, so I guess you can't really say that. But at least show two different angles, like when they do the replay, show a front angle and a side angle, and so you get two judges' perspective, and then just make the call from there.
That's an issue too. Is like where they seat the jury kind of biases what view that they see. That's why three judges exist, because depending where you sit, you can catch a different view of the lift. And if the jury is sitting behind, in between the center ref and the right ref, they don't see what the left ref saw.
Okay.
So, that kind of biases their view of the lift. Now, the jury is now the end-all, be-all, and I don't know if this video playback technology is going to change that aspect of it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it rolls out. I'm curious. I guess what we have... what is this? World Championships this year will be the first test bed for that. So
sure, or maybe the Pan Ams. I don't know which comes first.
Pan Ams will come first, I think. But that'll be interesting. So, what is your reffing philosophy? Basically, do you err inside the lifter? Are you strict with technique, or do you go strictly by the book? How do you approach it?
I always err on the side of the lifter.
Okay.
I think what a lot of referees do is they're just sitting there looking for an infraction.
Okay.
And if you read the rules, it actually says, that the lift is completed within satisfaction of the rules, meaning that, basically if the lifter meets all the requirements of how the snatch and how the clean and jerk are described, then you should kind of favor them or give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Especially with press out rule.
That's obviously the most complicated element of the whole rule book.
If I'm straining to see, did I see a press out? Was it an elbow turning? Was it a shoulder? Then I'm going to just give it to the lifter. Okay. Because I feel like if you're straining that much to look for something, then there really probably wasn't something there, and you're but I feel that there's a lot of refs that are just looking to give red lights.
Why do you think? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess they think that it makes it more fair, that if they're red lighting, if they're consistently red lighting lifters, and they're treating all the lifters that way, that they're being more fair.
Okay.
I don't think that's the case. I think that you're making it more frustrating for the lifter to want to compete because you're just nitpicking them on things that probably aren't really red light worthy.
Yeah, no, especially I would say when someone's going for their record and you see a clear strain and put a valiant effort in, and something as small as, let's say, a little shoulder motion that twists the elbow, and then to give someone a red light on that, it's nice to know that you'd err in their favor as opposed to be real hard knocked about it and just take the lift away.
Right. I don't know how I got this reputation of being a red light issuer. Well, maybe initially when I started, I was a little more strict.
You don't know how? Oh, okay. I was going to say, I think we softened you up on that. I think we had to tell you to be a little favorable. That I was being
too mean?
Yeah, exactly. You were
breaking. That could be, yeah.
I think that was a few years ago when you were a little bit, life soured you a little bit. So
yes,
you're
right.
You were looking to get back at it.
I was probably just in a bad mood. More than
so she's in a good mood now. Beth's been pretty happy lately. Her retirement's treating her well.
Yes.
So, but speaking of you reffing and infractions in the rule book and weightlifting as a whole, you're actually going to be conducting a referee course here, which is very exciting.
Yes.
January 26th, a Saturday. And give us a little preview. What are you going to go over and all that?
Well, I mean, I think an ongoing issue in our local area is that we don't have enough referees.
Okay.
And that has been an ongoing issue. Especially with, places that have a lot of lifters but not a lot of referees. So what's been happening is people have been straining to find people to fill in roles, etc. And so my solution to that was we need to get more local referees and we need to get them more involved.
Okay.
So the ref clinic is great because it's a time that you can just sit, go over the rules, have a little bit of an understanding of them before you go and take the exam. Because I think what a lot of people do, and other coaches have told me, is that their lifters will just sit and take the ref exam and fail it and then be like, whatever. But, you have to kind of review the rules before you go on and just...
Wait, you have to study before you take a test?
A lot of people assume since they know how to lift, then they know the rules. But
that's assuming they know how to lift.
Well, yeah. There's a lot of rules that are in the rule book that, people don't realize and need to go over just to make sure everyone's clear on, like oscillating the bar. That's a big rule that a lot of people don't know about. You're actually not allowed to physically oscillate the bar before you go into the jerk. You can take a breath, you can move the bar if you feel like it's not on the right position in your shoulders, but you can't physically oscillate the bar on purpose.
Kind of like Tian Tao's attempt at the Olympics?
Yeah.
Or not so World Championships?
Yeah, that one was debatable.
Very debatable.
I mean, he took a really big breath if that was the case.
I don't usually breathe by bending my knees.
Another one that I saw, this was at the AO series where I tested. That this kid just went directly in from the clean into the jerk. Like you need,
really?
Yeah, you need to stop for an instant before you initiate the jerk. You can't go directly out of your clean into a jerk. And somebody had to tell him, this is at a national event.
Well, that goes back to our discussion earlier about the coaches.
Someone had to tell him, no, you have to stop. You can't just go directly into the jerk. You need to stop for a moment.
Who would coach someone like that? How do you even make it that far?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Very interesting. Wow.
But yeah, so I think it'll be a good for people, even if you're not going to take the ref test and you're not going to review the rules.
Well, and by just interrupting, the ref test is free, correct? You just go on USA Weightlifting's website.
You go on USA Weightlifting.
There's no reason that you shouldn't do it, and especially USA Weightlifting looks highly upon you for doing so. Not that they're going to do anything for you, but it's good to be rough.
Well, it's an opportunity to be more involved in the sport as well, especially if you really enjoy competing and you want to be more involved. Being a local referee is a great way to be involved in the sport.
It is.
And I think knowing the rules in general is good for any lifter because that saves you from making silly mistakes on the platform.
And hopefully everyone knows about the no touching the bar with your foot rule now.
Yeah, that's a new one, and I think that we're gonna get a lot of red lights there in our events coming up.
That's crazy. What do you have any idea what prompted that?
From what I understand, it's that the European refs just always felt that was a big disrespect. To touch the bar with your foot to whoever the next lifter is, or stepping over the bar is a big disrespect in those countries as well. So I think it's something that they've wanted to implement for a long time, and maybe they're noticing it more and more.
I personally favor the rule. I've never touched the bar with my foot, or that's obviously, as we know, that's the rule number one on our rule board here. And I mean, you see so many American lifters who are tap dancing on the bar practically. I think it sets apart those who, to me, and the reason it's part of the rules, you take what you're doing serious. When you're just stepping on the bar, you're doing it's too nonchalant. You're not taking yourself serious. You're not taking the sport serious, and it's good to show the respect like that.
Sure. I agree. The only time I can see that it's kind of like you know, a lot of people will spin the bar with their foot to see if the bar spins properly, because sometimes it can get like a little stuck.
Yeah.
So in that case,
Your hands don't work?
That's true. You could use your hands.
Because people do it with their hands too.
That's true.
But let's say if you're lifting on USACO equipment, the bar doesn't spin freely like Eleiko stuff or even the Rogue stuff. I mean, the bars spin phenomenally well when you're using them, but the action as it's idle on the or static on the plate doesn't spin. So I mean,
right. It's a good point. Yeah, I think in general it's just going to be more. I also don't like if people like they drop the bar and then they put their foot on the bar to like stop it from bouncing. I don't know when that ever became a thing, but I think that it
CrossFit.
Yeah.
CrossFit created that.
Probably because you wanted to stop it for your next rep, because you probably were doing like 30 reps of something.
Well, it's that. I'd say it's that, and then it's also just in weightlifting. There's a particular culture, and there's a particular within that culture is a dedication of respect and a history behind it. In CrossFit, it's just that's missing from the CrossFit element of weightlifting. Is there's no history. It just has a start point from 0 AD and onward. There's no BC to it, and nothing that's been prior. Right. So no one takes it in that consideration.
Right.
Just like loading the bar with 10 kilo plates, loading 100 kilos with 10 kilo plates or such, but. No, that'll get me going off on a tangent.
Oh, that's loading a big tangent.
Loading 10 kilos and stacking 5s and 2.5s and everything else off the end of it.
And the bar bounces 4 feet sideways, and the person's like, "Why is my bar bouncing sideways?"
And nearly kills someone else. Yeah.
Maybe you should put the right weights on.
But ultimately that comes down to just that's awareness and respect for what you're doing.
Sure.
I say. So, all right. Well, Dr. Beth, I thank you for being a guest. We're looking forward to seeing you on the 26th. So for everyone, please, January 26th, it's a Saturday. It'd be, what did we say, $30 entry fee or something like that? $30 entry fee. It's good. Actually, that entry fee is going to be, what do we say? Donate. Thank you, sir. Donated to, let's say, our lifters traveling to a larger meet. That's going to help support our junior lifters going to Chicago in February. So it's be greatly appreciated. Not to mention, you'll learn a lot of really interesting things about the rules. Beth will give you good stories. She might even, who knows what she'll do. But it's also going to help lead into the test. And we encourage everyone to take the test. Also, how can someone sign up? Let's see. Someone could sign. Funny you should ask, because I know that was a question that was in everybody's mind. Please feel free to email us or slide in our DM. That's a common term these days.
Oh, yeah.
Email us. The kids are saying it, yes. Email us at nyweightlifting@gmail.com, or you can even go on our website. Our website has a contact box. You could fill that out. So just email and reserve a spot. We'll get that down. And then, please, again, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes soon. And aside that, everyone have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.